In the last tutorial we talked about if-else statements and conditions. So in this one we're going to talk about functions. Now there's two parts to creating every type of function. There's one where you actually create the function, and the way you create a function in Unity is, let me go down a little bit here, is you just write the word function and then whatever you want the function's name to be. So for example, I like to start my functions off with the capital letters. So for example, we'll call this one spawn cube, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to spawn a cube, and then you put an open and close parentheses, and then an open curly brace and a closing curly brace. And so this is the creation of our function. The next thing you have to do is call your function. So if you don't have a call in there, the function will never run. So for example, say we want to create a function that will spawn a cube on the stage. Well, let's create a variable that will store our cube. So just call a variable called cube, and we can give its data type the data type rigid body. And what a rigid body is any kind of geometric object that has physics attached to it. So for example, let's go ahead and save this, and let's create a cube. So we'll go to Game Object, Create Other, Cube, and then we'll go to Component, Physics, and we'll just add a rigid body to our cube. And by saying that in our script that we want a variable that's a cube, and that this cube variable can store any 3D model as long as it has a rigid body into it. It's what we're saying is it can store any geometric object. It doesn't have to be a cube, we just named it that, but that has actual gravity and mass and all other stuff. So this is a pre-made component inside of Unity. Okay, so here's our cube, and what we're going to do is actually create, so let me get rid of this so it's a bit cleaner. We're going to create a prefab. So let's go to Create, Prefab, and let's name this Cube Prefab. What a prefab is it's a way of connecting scripts and geometric objects together, and we'd only have to edit this one prefab and it'll actually update anything in the stage. So for example, if I grab my cube and I attach it to this prefab, and I go ahead and I delete my cube here, and I drag my prefab up, as you can see here. So let's go ahead and scale this up so you can see it. If I go down to my prefab here and I increase the scale, so you can see it's sort of updating here, and I go ahead and I say and so let's give it a little bit more information here. Okay, so something like that. And then I go up to my cube prefab and I click apply. Oops. Actually, what it'll do is it applied to our default guy. So say we duplicate this guy and we scale him up, and because he's a prefab and we hit apply, it'll update with all of the other prefabs in my scene. So say I scale this guy or I shrink him and then I hit apply, it'll also update this prefab here. So it's a way of sort of instancing out things, and that's what a prefab is. Okay, so now we have a prefab. Let's go ahead and delete him from our stage, because remember, the original point of our script is to spawn a cube. So let's go ahead and create a new variable within our function, and this is called a local variable. And whenever you create a local variable, it cannot be accessed anywhere but within that function. So we're going to call this cube spawn, and all we're going to do is we're going to give it the same data type as a rigid body. Okay, and what we're going to say is we'd like it to instantiate, and all instantiating really means is we'd like it to create or spawn something. Now instantiate is a built-in function within Unity, and it has three parameters. It has what we want to spawn, so we want to spawn the cube, and where do you want it located. So when we say transform, this is another built-in Unity thing. All I'm saying is I want this cube to spawn, and I want its position to be exactly where that empty game object is, because this script is attached to this empty game object. See here how the test script is attached? So what we're saying is, and that's what this instantiate function does. So we're saying we're going to call this variable called cube spawn, and remember I said it takes 3 parameters. One is the position, and then one is the rotation. So dot rotation. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. So we created a function. So if I hit play right now, you'll see nothing happens, and it says Unity Engine rigid body not assigned. So all it's asking for is, on this empty game object, it wants something with a rigid body, so we attached it. So now I hit play, you'll see I have errors. It's saying the name rigid body does not donate a valid type. So let's double check our code to make sure that we that I didn't, and you can see here that it's actually uppercase rigid body, so you want to make sure you double check that too. So let's hit play, and that removed those errors. But what you see here is nothing. Actually, nothing was spawned, and the reason why is, remember what I said at the beginning of this tutorial, and that's there's 2 parts. There's one where you create a function that does something, and we know that this function instantiates or creates a cube at the exact positions of our empty game object. Okay, and so let's go ahead and call this function. So let's say all we have to do is type in spawn cube, open close parentheses, and semicolon, and then go ahead and hit Control S and play it, and you'll notice that it spawned a cube on the stage. Okay, so briefly let's go over how that script works. We create a variable, and this is a global variable because we were able to drag our rigid body on it. We created a function called spawn cube, and what it does is, the second our function is called, it runs this cube variable, which is a rigid body. And what it says is, the second this runs, we have a variable called cube spawn, and it's storing this instantiated cube. And this instantiated cube has a transform, position, and rotation.